Welcome to the AT and Osteo Chronicles. I'm Bryn Bicknell.
And I'm Jenna Howe, and welcome to our podcast today. We're actually in the same room at the same time, so this is great. I'm going to try and look at the camera and not at myself as often as possible.
I was looking at myself, so thank you for reminding me.
So this is going to be a really interesting podcast this time because some of you might remember I sent out an email, sort of newsletter style, to everybody who subscribes, and I asked if anybody had any topics that they wanted to have covered and that kind of thing. And anyway, so I was letting Bryn know, and then she got super excited. So I'm going to give you a bit of a Cold Starts version of one of the responses I got from one of my clients over in Victoria. So she says, I'm 70 years old, and every time I start a new exercise program, whether it's yoga or gentle weight training, I wind up with an injury that sets me back. Just recently, while taking a yoga class, I somehow strained my right quadricep to the point that I could not walk without pain for a week. She's always been athletic. She had a serious illness that made her sedentary for a while, and she really felt like it set her back. And so now that she wants to get her strength back and her mobility and get back to the strength that she had before, and then also get more strength with some specific goals, she's finding that she's always getting set back. So this is what she had said was her primary issue, and Bryn lit up. So I'm actually going to let Bryn guide the podcast. I do have a couple of questions and some things to input, obviously, but I'm going to hand this over to Bryn.
So that is the exact type of person that I love working with, Jenna, and that's why I was so excited. What I find is that something happens, life happens, and we all tend to stop the things that we do at one point or another. And then we realize we want to get back into it. And when we do, we don't think about how we took years of training to get there. We kind of just jump in. And when we jump in, something comes up like a muscle strain or some soreness that maybe you had for a while, but it was smaller. And then you go back into it and it flares up because it wasn't a big deal when you weren't doing anything.
Yeah.
And so with that, we create patterns also by sitting in our body, and our body adapts to that sitting physique. And then we go and jump in, and that jump in is where things go wrong.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I see this often. This particular person it's not the first time somebody's come to me with a similar thing. I'm even finding, I'm 50 now, but I'm finding it's the same thing. And it's like, well, why aren't I doing, like, jumping back in the same way that I could when I was 40 and when I was 30? And I do think part of that is part of the aging process is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but our ligaments get a little stiffer and our tendons get a little stiffer. We just have a little less fluid going on in our joints and our joint structures. And that makes it a little bit more challenging. Those are the things that are creating the stability in our joints. And now we're that much older and we're thinking, well, we'll just go do the exact same thing I did before. It was fine before. And then it's not fine. And so for me personally, I find I need a longer warm up, a much longer warm up, and I need a longer cool down, and I have to be really focused on those things, because anything that I do in the middle will often sort of pull on my particular pattern, which is a right-sided ankle to jaw, right up the whole chain, is where my body's weakness is. If I don't warm up, or if I jump into something too soon, or I think I'm going to try a new activity or go back to an old activity. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that is probably exactly what's happening within the body. So with her particular issue, she was saying her quadriceps, right?
Yeah, her right quadricep.
So that's the front of the thigh. And so when you think about it, that one comes over the patella and inserts down. So if that becomes stiff, or if you stay sitting in a position, you're not getting your full range of motion. So now you're having the hardening, like you said, not as elastic, and things are not moving in that full range that you would have done.
Yeah.
And so then when you go into that full range, it's not as strong.
So what would you, I mean, so for me, I instantly start to think about isometrics, building an isometric foundational program.
Isometrics are great.
Yeah, isometrics are so great as a foundational program before getting back into all of the other activities. So that's sort of where I start to think is, okay, let's, from an osteopathic perspective, we're looking at making sure we've got good blood flow, lymphatic flow. Everything is the fascial lines, everything is moving well. That's the sort of first thing I'm thinking of. And then the next thing I think about is looking at some fundamental isometrics to rebuild from the ground up before we even go into the previous activities, like whether it's like yoga or paddleboarding, whatever the activity is.
Pickleball.
Pickleball. Yes. We're going to do one on pickleball.
Yeah. So, and then we also have to remember, what was the reason that you stopped doing these things? Was it an injury? Because if it was an injury, then you're talking about, were you limping? If you were limping, then you're going to have changes in your pelvic height. You're going to have changes in shoulder and upper torso rotations. And so you might want to address those little changes that happen before you jump back in.
But with this particular patient, her primary injury, it was a respiratory illness that took her down.
Oh.
And then after she healed and she wanted to get back into her yoga and paddleboarding and weight training, her body was just not responding.
So with a respiratory, was it viral?
I think so. Probably.
So we're talking about inflammation in the lungs. So what is it? We're going to talk about the ribs are going to move differently, which is going to cause the thoracic spine where they attach to move differently. The diaphragm is going to change as well because that draws in. So you're talking about then that moving the organs, which is more your realm, and then hips, because your bottom diaphragm is also your pelvic floor. So if your upper diaphragm is not working as well, the lower diaphragm is going to change, and that's going to change the pelvic stability.
Right. And that'll change the adductors, which are the inner thighs. But then this stability and the tightness in there is going to affect all the other muscles going around. So the outer thigh, even the hamstrings.
Upper neck muscles for breathing are going to probably change. So the neck will probably work a little bit differently. So we're talking about all these changes that could happen. And then your body is not in balance. So it's not as strong as it was before that. So then you now have everything weaker. Your body is not in that position for the muscles to optimally work. And then you're pushing it more than you've ever had.
Okay. So then I've got two questions that we can look at for this particular person, right?
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that we're also speaking directly to her because
she gave us the question.
Right. So strategies for at home. Obviously, this person's not in front of us. We're not in a diagnostic situation right now, so we can't offer anything super specific. But given that we know that there's a little bit of respiratory history, what would you suggest from a home perspective? So say she's out in a rural community and she can't access any type of manual therapy. What would you ask her to look at first as she's trying to figure out how to get her body back to something that feels functional for her?
So I would begin with the pelvis, with the osteopathic principles. Unity 1 is the pelvis. So we need to have that grounded first. So the first thing I would recommend is learning how to use your deep core, and then learning how to stabilize that area.
Mm-hmm.
And then working up from there and moving while maintaining that core.
Okay.
And then you would move up to the neck and do the same thing, where you would want to work on neck and upper back stability and balance that out.
Okay. And so for somebody who's at home, who might not know what you mean by deep core.
So your deep core is, it's called your transverse abdominis, or activating your pelvic floor. So those, there are, I think, tons. Maybe we need to throw some videos up there too. Tons of videos online where you're like, how do I activate my pelvic floor?
Right. There's actually,
How do I activate my core? And I can even just show you guys right now,
sure.
if Jenna doesn't mind turning.
You want me to turn around or
Just
move
face
out of
me,
the
just face me. Okay. So one of the ways that I was taught is reach over and place your hands on someone's shoulder.
Okay.
And then all you're going to do is press down. And now when you press down, you're going to feel almost like you're bearing a little bit down into your pelvis. So if you were to do it on me, you should feel that as well. That is the sensation you want to feel.
Okay.
Did you feel that when you press down?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you know that it's working. And then all you want to try and do is those beginner exercises while holding that and not allowing your pelvis to shift. Okay. So, and some good ones are heel slides, where you're laying on your back, knees bent, moving one foot out and the other, keeping those hips level.
Yeah. And I think what I would encourage someone to do if they're not going to come in and get an assessment is to work on lateral breathing. So a lot of times we're taught to do a 3-part breath, and it's like belly, chest, like rise the belly, bring it up into the chest, and then wave it back down. When you're doing a lateral breath, you're trying to get your rib cage to expand sideways. So sometimes I will ask, like, you know, if you've got, this makes me feel old, but anyway, bellows for the fireplace.
I do know what those are. So it's not that old.
Or if you had like wings and you wanted to like open up your wings, just having that rib cage expand. So your diaphragm is a muscle that goes not a full 360 degrees, but like a 270 degrees, right? It goes from the spine all the way around. And we want to make sure that those muscles not just work at the front, but also work at the side. And so part of that core stability is making sure that your ribs can even go sideways. So sometimes what I'll get people to do, I don't know if I can stand. Here we go. Perfect. I do like a little press. Not now, if you have osteoporosis or osteopenia, you're not going to really press. Okay. So I'm just going to practice that. But I just do like a slight little bit of compression. And then when I take a breath in, you can see my hands are pushing away. It takes a while to get used to that feeling. So now I'm going to do it on Bryn. So turn around. You can't really.
You want me to stand up?
Yeah, you can stand up. There we go. So I'm just putting my hands on her ribs. I'm just doing just a little bit of pressure. Good. And then down. So I could feel your shoulders rise first. So really try to push sideways there. And then down. Good. And one more. And then down. So you can get people, or you can look in a mirror. You can look in a mirror, put your hands on your ribs and expand the ribs. Watch yourself in the mirror as you're doing that lateral expansion, because from like a mirror neuron, that will help to program your body to go, oh, that's what a sideways breath feels like. So that would be the one thing that I would add, and that ties in with the pelvic floor quite nicely, actually. Yeah. So I think those would be the two things that we would do from that. And then from a manual therapy, like from an osteopathic perspective, I would probably go back. I would, from a visceral perspective, be looking at diaphragm, lung, pleura, how are the organs moving, something really practical from that perspective. See if it links back into the spine, in through the thoracic area, or like T12, you know, when we have a respiratory illness, just that kind of compression. So I'd be looking at opening that perspective. I'd probably start there and then just add isometrics. Yeah, that's probably how I would do it. How would you approach it in session?
In session, I would probably be looking at aligning the pelvis, the spine, and then figuring out which muscle patterns are still left, or the non-functioning muscle patterns, to correct them so that it'll hold.
Yeah. So two different approaches, both equally good. And as we know, it's everything is based on assessment. So what we might think, okay, this is how we approach the situation, but then the person coming in might be coming in with a whole different scenario, and
Yes.
our previous plan goes out the window, and we have to redirect, and we find something completely different that's connected, but is not what you would think is a traditional thought process. So it just gives you some things to think about. So just to summarize, if you're, for example, say over 50 or over 60, you've had an injury or an illness that has made you sedentary, and then you want to get back to activity, but now every single time you want to get back into any kind of activity, you get re-injured, and then it takes longer and longer to recover. We have a home option of looking at pelvic floor, pelvic stability, checking your deep core. You could, YouTube a few of those things, or you could reach out and we could give you some suggestions. Adding maybe some breathing, some diaphragmatic movement, and making sure the ribs are moving really well. And then in session, just, figuring out more of a root cause, or really trying to tap into what's really happening in that respiratory system that is not allowing the rest of the body to do what it needs to do.
Yeah. I just need to get on those Pilates videos, because that breathing is exactly the way they teach it in the Pilates.
Yeah. So Brandon, so what she means is that she's going to be providing at some point in the next couple of months or so some Pilates rehab videos for everybody
on YouTube.
Yeah. Free. Yeah. Free. Just something that we're doing. We're working on a couple of other projects as well. So just sort of keep on checking in, and, if you don't see anything, you could let us know, hey,
looking for it. Give us a little push to get it done sooner. Yeah.
Great. So I think that's it for today's session.
Thank you to the individual that emailed us back.
Yes, thank you. And we hope this provided you some information, some clarification, and maybe some hope that there are ways through this particular situation for you.